So there's more to that. I think it's going to be, Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with an update on books I wish I had read last year. So you may remember at the end of 2022, I did 2 videos. I'll link them above if you'd like to check them out, if you haven't already, where I talked about books that I wish I had read last year in 2022. One of them was just a bunch of books that I wish I'd read, and one was series I wish I had made some progress on. And I made those, I kind of make those or something similar to those every single year in my like massive videos in December. Didn't really think anything of it, kind of moved on. And then I kind of found them again recently and thought, I'm just gonna take a look and see kind of what was on this list. I've already forgotten what was on this list. And I've actually read like almost half, I think, of the books that were on those 2 videos. So I thought it might be kind of fun to do like an experiment this year where I'll do like a midway check-in, which is what this video is going to be, on the books that I've read that's actually on those lists, and then maybe a check-in at the very end of the year and see if I finished all those books or not, because this was really just like a hodgepodge mess of stuff, and I either have read them or have plans, like pretty immediate plans to read a lot of these books. So like I said, I will link them. I'll link them both down below, but I'll link them in the cards as well if you'd like to check out those videos if you haven't seen them already. But let's just take a look and see what I put on those lists and how I did. So the first video I did was just a bunch of books I wish I had read last year. So we'll start with those. The first one is The Sound of Snow, and this is by Katherine Kinsley. This is a historical romance that looks honestly beautiful, and it's got that winter vibe in it. And I really wanted to read this in the winter last year, and I really wanted to read this in the winter this year. And this, we're starting off with not a bang, because I haven't read this one yet. And so I'm trying to tell myself that it's maybe something I don't have to wait till the winter for, but the fact that it says snow in the title makes me feel like I need to. Also, I can't find an audiobook of this, which isn't the end of the world, but it does make it easier for me to get to these quicker. This one follows our main character, Joanna, whose cousin has passed away, and she is kind of convinced that the guy that her cousin married is kind of the one who did it. So she comes to their estate and works as their kid's like governess in a way, and try to figure out what happened to her cousin. And then of course there's a romance between her and her cousin's husband. There's a mystery element to it. I just haven't made time for it, and I haven't read anything by this author, which like I said is Katherine Kinsley. So we'll see. I'm always in the mood for historical romance, but for some reason I've been putting this one off. So that's one that I haven't read yet. The next one on this list is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune, which I have read. I read this one in April. It was part of the Magical Readathon. This was recommended by so many people, honestly, and I finally read this with my friend Lauren. So we both read this one and fell head over heels in love with this one. It follows our main character Wallace, who has recently kind of passed away, and it's in that weird in-between time where he is technically dead, but there's like, he's in limbo, let's say, and he goes to this tea shop, which is run by a guy named Hugo. And Hugo's whole job is to basically help people kind of cross over from life into death into whatever the next step is. And so Wallace is, basically he was at his funeral, and there was nobody that showed up except for his ex-wife and a couple of people that he worked with, and none of them seemed to like him a whole lot. So he's very down about what he thought his life was. And so we have him and Hugo kind of becoming closer, and him figuring out what this next step, kind of like what his life was like. And I loved it. It's definitely a tougher book because it is about, it's basically about death the entire time. But it does have a lot of lighthearted moments, which I enjoyed. So I have read that one, so that's exciting. I've also read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This one I read really, really early on. I did a video where I actually read some of the books in on these lists, which are books that I wish I had read in 2022. So I'll leave that vlog linked above. It's the very first vlog I did of the year. This was on it. I did finally get my beautiful Fairy Loot edition, which I've loved, and I think I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it so much. It's a fun, cozy fantasy story. It follows our main character Mika, who is a witch, and she basically gets contacted by someone who has 3 witches, and when witches kind of are in the same place, it produces a lot of energy, and so they are producing a lot of energy and not being able to control their powers, and she's asked to come in and kind of teach them. So she goes to this manor, and there's some lovely people who work there, and then there's also a very grumpy librarian who works there, who has basically been in charge of the kids this entire time. So it's a romance between the 2 of them and her time finding a family. There's a lot more to it than that, of course, but I loved this book so much. I actually had the arc of it and finally read it this year. So I didn't read it in time because it came out at the end of last year, but I loved it and I got my beautiful edition, which is exciting. So if you like cozy fantasy, that kind of light fantasy, I will say, this is definitely a book for you. But I read this one and loved it. I also, in April, finished reading A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair, which is the first in the Hades and Persephone series that she has written. I pretty much enjoyed this. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a Hades and Persephone retelling set in like a modern day setting. Hades is in charge of like this gambling den kind of, and Persephone is a budding journalist. And so she is trying to get a story on Hades, and they end up making a deal by accident. And the deal is that like she will have to create life in like the underworld, but she does not have the correct powers. So all she does is create death. And so there's like this weird dynamic between the 2 of them. I enjoyed it. It was pretty good. I'm not sure I will continue with the series. I think I've gotten what I wanted from this, but I did enjoy this, and I'm glad that I've read it, and I love a good Hades and Persephone retelling. So that's another one that I've read. And now we're getting into more of the ones I haven't read. The first one being Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Rayburn. This is one that I'm hoping to get to this fall. It's giving me like early fall vibes, so maybe in August sometime I'll get to this one. But it follows 4 women who are part of an I guess an agency, basically, where they are hired assassins, but they are significantly older. I believe they're in their 60s, and they are all kind of on a trip for retirement. They've like been retired from the company they work for, which is called the Museum, and someone shows up and tries to kill them, and they're like, no, we're not doing that. So I think it's them trying to figure out who is out to get them, and also helping them stay alive, and it's very much like old school versus new school tactics. So it just sounds like a lot of fun, and a weird vibe for assassins, if you will. But I thought it was being a lot of fun, and I got it from Book of the Month last year. I haven't gotten around to it quite yet, but I do have plans for this fall, so fingers crossed. Another one that I should be getting to pretty soon is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I was really hoping to get to this one last year because it did come out last year. I was hoping to finish it maybe in August sometime because it was set in August, but that didn't happen, and it's also again on my summer reading list for this year. So I'm hoping to get to this one in the next like month or so. So we'll see what June holds for us. We have Nora, who is a literary agent, and her sister basically asked her to take a vacation for the entire month of August, and they go to this really tiny town in North Carolina, and she's like, sure, why not? And so she's gonna just relax for this entire month, and then she keeps running into this guy named Charlie, who she knows from the city, who is a editor. And so it's the 2 of them, and they keep having a lot of meet cute moments. I'm interested to see what else is going to be included in these books, because Emily Henry is really good at having those amazing romances, but also having a lot of conversation along with that. So I'm curious to see where it's going to go. But I love Emily Henry, and I really need to read this one because her newest book came out, and I do need to read that one as well. But this is the one. It's on my summer TBR, so fingers crossed. Another one that I put on multiple lists, and I keep not getting to it, so hopefully soon, we shall see, is The Double Vice, and this is by Chris Holcomb. This is a murder mystery set in like 20s. So this one follows our main character Dash, who is a New York City gay speakeasy owner. And so one night when he's celebrating his birthday, at the height of Prohibition, one of his patrons ends up getting murdered, and I think all fingers point to him, and he's like, it wasn't me. And so he is trying to figure out, he and his friends are trying to figure out who actually did it. So it's a murder mystery set in the 20s. I've had this on my TBR for so many years. I really want to get to it in the fall. It feels like a perfect fall book, and I keep not getting to it. Like I've even got where I separated the pages because I thought I was going to get to it last year and it didn't happen. So hopefully we can get to this soon. It is an indie published book that Chris gave me a few years ago, so I'm really, really hoping to dive in. I've got the section for like every 20-25 pages, which shouldn't be too much of an issue for me, but I keep not reading it. So this is one of those that I should have gotten to and I didn't, and I still haven't. The next one is Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is the second book in the From Blood and Ash series. And as of recording this, I am actually currently reading this. So it's not done quite yet, but it's definitely in the going to be done very, very soon category. It's definitely part of this book has been recommended so many times, but it's part of the series I'm doing, which is 12 books in 12 months. So you should be seeing an installment with this one in it relatively soon, but I am currently reading it. But this is a fantasy romance series that follows our main character, Poppy, who is the maiden. And in this world, the maiden is ascended, and like she doesn't know what that means, and we as readers don't really know what that means, but she's basically been going to be given to the gods. So she has been protected and sheltered her entire life. She has scars on her face, but no one really knows that because she has basically been wearing a veil the entire time. She's always in white. Only a certain amount of people who can see her without the veil. One of those is like her lady's maid, her bodyguard, and the head of security are like the three people. And then I think some of the higher ups that are like teaching her, and the like the dukes and stuff can see her, but only like a select handful of people. And so she's kind of very much done with this captivity thing, and the plot gets started when she gets a new personal bodyguard named Hawk, and he just kind of like opens her horizons a little bit. It's fantasy, there's crazy stuff with it. This is the second book and I'm loving it so far. So not too far into it as of recording this. I'm only about 80 pages, so still have a lot to go into this book, but I'm loving it and I'm actually currently reading it. So that's kind of one of the check in the going to be completed category. The next one is Mr. Malcolm's List, and this is by Suzanne Elaine. This one I got because I put on this list because the movie came out last year and I really wanted to read the book before I watched the movie. It seems like a really, really short historical romance about a guy who has a list of like what makes a perfect woman, and this girl named Selena arrives in town, and she's a vicar's daughter, and her friend basically like invites her to London under the disguise of like possibly like, I don't know, she wants to get back at Malcolm for some way and reason, and like she's going to use our main character to do it. There's way more to it than that, but I have read another historical romance by her, and it literally says here on the back, move over Mr. Darcy, there's a new man in town. So it's definitely giving Jane Austen vibes. So it's super short. I should be able to get to it relatively quickly at some point, so maybe sometime this summer I can squeeze it in, but yeah, that's still one I haven't gotten to yet. And the last book that was included in the first video was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, which I also read in that video at the very beginning of the year. So I have finished this one, and I've actually finished both books. I got the second one, the sequel, at the end of last year, I want to say, or maybe the beginning of this year, I can't remember, but I have these special Fairy Loot editions. So I've read those two, and the third one is coming out later this year. So I am so excited to kind of have the conclusion of this trilogy, or this fell head over heels in love with this story. It's a fun fantasy YA story that has some romantic elements to it. But this book series basically follows our main character, Evangeline, and it takes place in this world where there are fates, and the fates are thought of as not the best thing. They're kind of immortal. At the beginning of this book, the person that she's fallen in love with is about to marry someone else, and she is not okay with this. So she goes to the fate of broken hearts, Jax, and basically asks him to stop the wedding at all costs. And he does in exchange for 3 kisses that he will have her give somebody else at any time. So Jax has a whole past with him, and he has been searching for his true love, and she's the only person that he can kiss without killing them. So that's why her kisses that he has bargained with Evangeline are for somebody else. And it's the 2 of them, and there's way more, of course, to it. There's a lot of prophecy and things of that nature in this story, and I really, really enjoyed the first one. Honestly, I did not expect to enjoy this book nearly as much as I did, and so I've continued, and I'm very much enjoying this one. So I did read this one, so yay, that's exciting. All right, now moving into the books that are on the second video, which are books or series that I wish I had continued in some way. I put everything on this list because a lot of these are just like 1 or 2 that are left in the book series. So I did a lot of like series finishing in this video. First one being The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I have not read this one yet, but again, this feels like a fall book, so I've been putting this one off until we get to the fall. I meant to get to it last fall and it didn't happen, but this is the third and final book in this series, which is The Inheritance Games. There is other books in this world that she has created. I think she has a different series that has started maybe last year, where it follows other characters, or it's the same world, it's the same family, but it's not the same story. So this is the final book in this story arc, and then there's more to continue if you want to. But this one basically follows our main character Avery, who is she's kind of struggling. She lives with her sister. They kind of live paycheck to paycheck, and she is a high school student who works alongside to help her sister out. And the book starts when she gets named as one of, I think, the sole inheritance of this will, and doesn't know the guy. I think it's a super old guy who gave her all the money and doesn't understand why she was given all the money. And so she comes to his house to collect the inheritance, and in doing so ends up meeting all four of his grandsons who are about her age. And this guy was huge on riddles, and so they kind of are trying to figure out why her, and if there's any other riddle type things that are going on in the background that the grandfather has set in motion. So there's a lot of mystery with this one. This is, like I said, the last book in the series, so I'm interested to see where it's going to continue. I've had very mixed opinions about the other two because I've enjoyed my time reading them, but I've also hated all the characters. So it's that weird, like, the plot's great, the characters suck. So one of these days I'll get to the final book, but this one I haven't finished yet, but hopefully this fall. Another one I haven't quite finished yet is Misrule, and this is the second book by Heather Walter in this duology, which is Malice. The first one was Malice, and this is a sapphic Sleeping Beauty kind of retelling. So it takes place in this world, and we follow our main character Alice, who is a dark grace. And basically what that means is you've got graces who can grant certain wishes to people, and a dark grace is someone who can do like curses and stuff, and they use their blood to do it. And she ends up running into the Sleeping Beauty character in the first book, and the Sleeping Beauty character is in a long line of people who have been cursed, and so she needs to find her true love and kiss them and fall in love by, I think, 18, and she's got about a year left. And so she and Alice team up to help her find her true person, you know. And so this is just the second half of the story. It's only 2 books, so I should be able to get to it, and I just haven't yet. So this continues on directly from the end of the first book. There's a lot to it, and I think we're going to learn quite a lot about the character of Alice in this one. I also just need to find a synopsis because I've forgotten most of the first book, but I do need to get to this one, and it's literally the last thing in this duology. It's only 2 books. You think I would have gotten to it by now, but I haven't, so this is one that I need to get to. The next 3 are all part of the same series, and I've read all of them because I started a new series here on my channel called Simplify My Series, where I do exactly that. I'm trying to simplify the amount of series that I have on my lists, especially the series that I've started. So the goal of these videos is to read books that I've only read the very first book in, or read series where I've only read the first book so that I can hopefully get through them quicker. And the first video I did was the Entangled with Fae series by Tyssonia Odette. So we have Heart of a Raven Prince, Kiss of a Selkie, and A Taste of Poison, which I read all of these. And as of when I started that video, I thought this was done, but there's now announced there's at least 1, maybe 2 more that are going to continue, but they're all standalones, so it's like a companion series where they take place in the same general world, but they don't really have to do with each other. Now some characters cross, so like the main character in this book showed up in the previous book for like a hot second. Didn't really impact the plot a whole lot, but enough that the name is something that like would have clicked with you. So they all kind of show up in each other's books, but they're not like important, so you don't have to like read them in any order. But I did it for the sake of this video because I'd read the very first one, which is Curse of a Wolf King, and I very much enjoyed. These are all fairy tale retellings, so we do have, they're all set in like the Fae world, but they are all fantasy retellings. We have Heart of a Raven Prince, which was a Cinderella retelling. We have Kiss of a Selkie, which was a Little Mermaid retelling, and then A Taste of Poison, which was a Snow White retelling. And the next one that's going to come out, I believe, is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. I also think she's going to do a Rapunzel retelling at some point in the future, but the next one is Sleeping Beauty. So I really enjoyed these. These are fantastic standalones set in a fairy world, and that's just been really, really fun. But I read all of these in one video, and I have finished them. So that is exciting because that's a good chunk of this list was that series. Next one is 2 books that are part of the same series that I'm hoping to do a Simplify My series on at some point in the future, and that is the next 2 books in the Curse Breaker series. I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely last year sometime, I want to say. So we have A Heart So Fierce and Broken and A Vow So Bold and Deadly. There's only 2 more in this series, so I should be able to get to them pretty quickly. And I remember really enjoying the first one. It's like a Beauty and the Beast retelling set in a fantasy world. And I remember really enjoying it, and I'm excited to see where the next 2 go. I've heard mixed opinions on these, especially the second one, because the second one follows the character that's kind of like a side character in the first book, but one that I very much enjoyed, so I think that that one will be just fine. And then I know that she has a different series, which is Defy the Night, which I've heard is connected in some way to this one. I might be wrong on that, but we'll see. That one might. I've decided if I want to combine those into one video or not, or if that's just crazy because that's like 5 books I have to read in one video. But these are the next 2 and the final 2 in this trilogy that I really need to get to. Haven't done it. But Beauty and the Beast is always something that I love seeing the different retellings of. I know there's 10,000 versions of them, just like there's 10,000 versions of Hades and Persephone, but I can't get enough. So these are 2 I haven't read, but I want to and have plans to relatively soon. The next one is, at the time I put this on the list, it was the only book that's out in the series, but as of recording this, there's now 1 more out there, but that is the 3rd book in the Regency Vows series, which is To Marry and to Meddle by Martha Waters. Like I mentioned, the 4th one, which I have right here, is now out, so I can get to that one. But I did finish this one. This was the only book that at the time of making that video was on this list, but I did finish it. It's A Marriage of Convenience. This is a companion historical romance series where it's basically the same friend group, and they do kind of build on each other in the sense of like the couples. If you read this one without reading the first 2, the couples are spoiled, but otherwise the story, you don't really need the first 2 really to enjoy this one. But this is a marriage of convenience between a woman who basically comes from a family who has a lot of debt, and so whoever she marries has to take on that debt. And the person that has, the only person who's been courting her is someone who's older, and she does not like them. And then you've got this guy right here who owns a theater, and the theater is known as a place that people will take their mistresses but not their wives, and he doesn't like that. And so he thinks if he marries someone from a greater standing, then she can help the reputation that's surrounding his theater, and maybe he can do a little better. So the 2 of them marry for convenience. He's going to take on her debt and get rid of him. She can get out of the clutches of her parents, and then she can also help him with this theater, and it's their relationship. So I enjoyed this one. I think I gave it ended up giving it like 3 stars, but I did read this one earlier this year, so I have read that one. The other one that I have read that I still have it. It's in this house somewhere, but I'm unhauling it, so it's in a box downstairs. That's just way too much effort to get to. And that is Stupid Love Comedy. So this is a bind up that I read of. It's got 3 volumes in it, and I read the first one last year and really enjoyed. And earlier this year, I think in the same video that I did the Regular Witches and then Once Upon a Broken Heart, I also read the final 2 volumes of this book, and they were okay. The first one was definitely the best one, and then it just kind of went downhill from there, honestly. So I think I gave them both like 3 stars. 3. I'm not sure if I gave the last one 3 or 2 stars, but I did finally read this one. It was, like I said, a bind up, so it was real thick and real big, and instead of just reading 1 volume, I decided to read both of them. So I have done this one. This one has been completed, which is good because it was really big on my shelves, and because of how it ended up, I'm glad that I've read it, so I know that I don't need it in my collection anymore, and I can kind of move on, and it can go to a better home that might enjoy it a little bit more. But I have read this one as well. And then the next one is another one that's going to be hopefully read during the summer sometime. It is on my summer TBR, and that is Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Kleypas, the first in the Wallflowers series. I've had this on so many lists at this point, it's not even funny anymore, and I really need to get to it, and I keep not doing that. So hopefully the summer is the time that I finally read it, because it's the only book. Well, there is a prequel book to this series that I haven't read, but as far as the main series, this is the only book in the main series that I haven't read yet, and then I can be done with this series. And it's basically a series of companion novels where it follows these 4 friends who consider themselves wallflowers, and each book follows a different woman in this friend group. This one follows Annabelle, who is honestly perfect. Everyone thinks that she could be the perfect wife, but she has no dowry, so no one wants her as a wife. And then she is approached by a guy named Simon, who is very attracted to her, but only wants her as a mistress and not a wife. And she is not interested in that. So I'm interested to see how that relationship started, because I've seen how it's continued in the next like few volumes, or at least the next few books in the series. So I'm interested to see how it started. I'm also interested to see how the friendship group started, because they're such good friends and I love them. So yeah, this is one that I haven't read yet, but hopefully this summer. All right, the next two are the final 2 volumes of Dreaming Sun, which is by Ichigo Tukano, which is 9 and 10. I have finished both of these. I finished the entire series. I think I read this one in April, so I finished it relatively recently, but I'm also unhauling this entire series because it started out so strong and then it just went downhill, which is unfortunate, because I feel like of all the manga series that I finished, they've all kind of started great and gone downhill. So I'm hoping to find a good one here that is going to continue to be great. So far, Spy Family is the one that's been continued to be good. But this one series basically follows our main character, Shimana, who feels unloved at home. Her father has remarried and they have a new child, and she feels like this new kid is getting all the attention. So she runs away and meets this random guy in a park, and he basically offers her a place to stay, with some conditions. One of them being that, like, I think at the moment she meets him, he's like drunk or something, so he needs help finding the key to the house. But he also wants her to tell him why she's running away and to have a dream and fall in love. And she's like, I can do that. And that's like the rules he's got for everyone who lives in this house. And she moves in, and a couple of guys from the school that she goes to also live there. It's a very found family vibe. She's really kind of coming into her own through this series, but the love interest is not my favorite decision in this series, which is why I think I did not like it so much. But I finished it, so now we can officially unhaul the entire series, and it can go to someone who maybe will enjoy it way more than I did. There was just something about this that I just couldn't get fully on board with, so it needs to go to a better home. But I have finished it, so that's good. I also had Our Violent Ends on this list by Chloe Gong, which is the second book in our Violent Delights series, or duology. So I was debating on whether or not I wanted to get to this one, and then I believe this is also one that I read at the very beginning of this year in that vlog that I keep mentioning. So I loved it so much that I ended up buying my own copy, and now I want to reread the first one just to see if there's anything in the first one that I didn't pick up on, because I like enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite thing, which is why I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick up the second one. But I'm really glad that I did, because the second one was just so good, and now I'm obsessed with this author, and her other duology that she's doing, Foul Lady Fortune, I'm obsessed with, and I have the first book in that one, and I love it. So I love this one. It is a reimagining of the Romeo and Juliet story, but it takes place in Shanghai between 2 rival gangs. So we have our Juliet and our Roma characters, who in the first book, a lot of members from their respective gangs end up dead, and they discover that at first they think it's the other gang who's doing it, and then they kind of run into each other and discover that, oh no, it's happening to both of them. It must be an outside force. And they team up to figure out kind of what's going on, and romance. And so big things happen at the end of the first book, which kicks off the second book, which is why I wanted to keep reading. And I'm so glad I did, because this one was just so good and I really enjoyed it, and I have read it. So that's very exciting. This second video is doing much better, because the last 2 books on this list are the other Simplify My Series video that I actually did a little bit earlier this month, and that is the last 2 books in the Guardians trilogy by Nora Roberts, the first one being Bay of Sighs and the second one being Island of Glass. This is a trilogy that basically follows 6 people who are in search of 3 stars that were kind of scattered across the globe. They were hidden by 3 goddesses in kind of celebration in the past for the moon, and there's also like an evil force who is out to find all of these stars. And so these 6 people are kind of tasked with finding these stars, and they team up in the first book, and it just continues from here. And each book follows a different couple within this group of 6. So I read this one, like I said, in a very recent vlog, so I'll leave it linked above if you'd like to check it out. I very much enjoyed my time reading this one. I still think, having separated myself from it so like by I think a couple of weeks at this point, I still think the first one's my favorite, but I really enjoyed this series, and I like Nora Roberts' writing, and I like her character development and her plot and everything like that. So she's definitely an author that I'm hoping to dive more into this year, but this is one of the series that was like top priority for me to finish this year. And I have. So that's 2 more books I can check off this list as being completed. So I just calculated everything, and on this video I had, or in both these videos, I had 25 books total, and the ones I have not read yet are only these 10. Plus if you count Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which I'm currently reading, but that one will be done soon. So these 10, which is honestly not that bad considering that's less than half, and I'm really proud of myself for doing that. This was a really random video that I just decided to do because I had a look at these lists and I thought it was so cool that I actually was getting through the books I wish I had read the year before. So maybe this could be something that I do every year. I don't know why it worked so well this year, but I thought I would just do a quick check-in and see how I did. And I did pretty dang good, if I do say so. So I'm thinking about having a final check-in at the end of the year where I see if I finished these 10 or not, and we can go from there and just see if I can get to some of these soon. I mean, like, a lot of these I have plans to read pretty quickly, so fingers crossed I actually do that. But I hope you guys enjoy this super random check-in. Let me know if any of these 10 books that I haven't read yet, if I should prioritize them for one reason or another. If you've read them, let me know your thoughts on them. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know your thoughts on them as well. And that's, I think, all I've got for you guys. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well as other fun bookish links. So remember to check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!